Hello everyone, and welcome to the second Whale Education Month lesson. In the last lesson, we learned all about the evolution of whales and dolphins and where they came from. In this lesson, we're going to look more closely at the amazing adaptations that whales and dolphins have evolved to help them survive in their environment. Before we begin, let's refresh our memories and remind ourselves what the word adaptation means. Living things are adapted to their habitats. This means that they have special features or characteristics known as adaptations that help them to survive. Their bodies and behaviours have changed over time, and as we learnt from the first lesson, this is called evolution. Whales and dolphins' bodies have evolved to be better suited to their ocean environment and help them survive. In this lesson, we will take a closer look at some of the physical adaptations that whales and dolphins have on their bodies that help them to survive in their habitats today. We are going to look at their dorsal fins, their pectoral fins, their flukes, their blowholes, their body shape, their blubber, their coloration, their size, how they dive, and how they hunt their prey. One of the adaptations that whales and dolphins have evolved to have since leaving the land is their dorsal fin. This is the fin that is found on top of their backs. On a dolphin, the dorsal fin is usually big compared to the rest of their body and is in the centre of their back. On a large whale, the dorsal fin is usually quite small compared to their bodies and is located further back on the whale's back, nearer its tail than its head. So what is a dorsal fin, and why did cetaceans evolve to have them? Dolphins and porpoises are smaller than whales and are generally faster swimmers. Having a large dorsal fin in the middle of their back helps the dolphins to steer and stabilise themselves in the water when they are swimming at high speeds, making them better at catching prey and escaping dangers. Therefore, a big dorsal fin is a useful adaptation for a dolphin or porpoise to have. Orcas, also known as killer whales, are the largest members of the dolphin family. The male orcas have much larger dorsal fins than the females. Scientists think that this is because the females over time have chosen to mate with males that have bigger dorsal fins. This is probably because growing a big dorsal fin takes up energy and shows that a male is strong and healthy, and females are more likely to choose to mate with those males than ones with smaller dorsal fins. This has meant that over time, males have inherited larger dorsal fins from their fathers. Most of the very large whales, also known as the great whales, have very small dorsal fins compared to their body size. As some whale species evolved to be bigger and bigger, they also became slower, and so over time used their dorsal fins less and less as they were no longer travelling at high speeds, and so didn't need to stabilise themselves. This has meant that the dorsal fin has adapted and become smaller because the whales don't really need them for steering anymore. Perhaps in another few million years, the descendants of some of these large whales that we have today might not have dorsal fins at all. Some whales have already evolved to have no dorsal fin at all. This adaptation is often seen in species that live in cold areas like narwhals and belugas. These species are known to swim under sea ice in the Arctic, and a large dorsal fin on their back would get in the way. Dorsal fins are also adapted to help whales and dolphins to control their body temperature, and they can release heat through their dorsal fins if they get too hot. Species that live in cold climates need to be good at conserving and keeping their heat in their bodies, so narwhals and belugas probably don't need a dorsal fin to help them release heat. Another advantage of not having a dorsal fin is that the belugas are less visible from the surface, making it harder for potential predators like polar bears to spot them. Right whale species, such as the southern right whale and the North Atlantic right whale, also have no dorsal fin. When the ancestors of the whales walked on land, they used 4 legs to do so. As we saw in the first lesson, over millions of years, those front legs turned into fins that we call pectoral fins. This adaptation from front limbs with finger bones to pectoral fins helps the whales and dolphins to steer themselves better in the water. Underneath the skin of the pectoral fins, there is still a skeleton showing finger bones that look similar to our human hands. On modern whales and dolphins we see today, they have no back legs at all. But if you ever visit a skeleton of a whale in a museum, you can see that they have tiny leg bones by their hips where their legs used to be. As we saw in Lesson 1, the early ancestors of whales, like the land-walking Pachycetus, had long, thin tails. Over millions of years, these tails have adapted to have fins on the end called flukes. Having flukes makes it much easier for whales and dolphins to swim through the water, using their flukes like a paddle to push them forward. Whales and dolphins also use their tail flukes to communicate with each other by slapping them down on the water. Their tails are also much thicker and stronger and have big muscles inside to move their flukes up and down. As we learned in the first lesson, the blowholes of whales and dolphins are their versions of nostrils. Over millions of years, whales and dolphins have adapted the position of their blowholes to be on top of their head. This makes it easier for them to breathe at the surface. Take a look at these 3 skulls. The first one is the skull of an Artiocetus, an ancestor of the Amazon River dolphin that lived 47 million years ago. Its nostrils are towards the front of its face. The Artiocetus changed and evolved and became the Proseuglodon, and they lived 36 million years ago. As you can see, their nostrils are further up their skull on top of their snout. And finally, over more millions of years, and many more changes and adaptations later, the Proseuglodon became the Amazon River dolphin. It still survives today, and as you can see from the skull, the Amazon River dolphin's nostrils are right on top of its head, and they are known as its blowhole. This makes it much easier for the river dolphins to breathe at the surface, as they don't have to lift their entire heads out of the water, saving them energy and making it easier for them to hide from dangers above the surface. Now let's look at the general shape and size of cetaceans and how that helps them to survive. As you can see from this picture, whales and dolphins have what we call very streamlined bodies. This means they are long and smooth and don't have too many bits sticking out, a bit like a bullet or a torpedo. This helps to make them travel faster in the water, as the water can rush over their bodies quickly. We call this being hydrodynamic, and use this word to describe something that can move quickly through water. Lots of other animals that live in water have evolved to be streamlined or hydrodynamic, like sharks and otters. Whales and dolphins are at the top of the food chain and are predators, so it's unsurprising that they have adapted their bodies to be fast swimmers to help them catch their prey. The fin whale is the fastest whale and is sometimes called the greyhound of the sea, as it can reach speeds of 40 kilometers per hour. Many whale and dolphin species have adaptations to help them survive in cold water. A very important adaptation for this is blubber. Blubber is a layer of fat on the bodies of marine mammals that keeps them warm in the cold water. Species that live in cold waters in places like the Arctic and Antarctica have thicker blubber than species that live in warm tropical seas. Blubber is also a great adaptation that helps whales with buoyancy, which helps them control how they float and sink in the water. It also helps animals to store energy, something they need lots of to keep warm in icy water. The whale with the thickest blubber is the bowhead whale. This is a species that is adapted to live in the Arctic, and its blubber can be half a metre thick. The colour of an animal is very important to its survival, and the colours and patterns on whales and dolphins is something that has adapted and changed as they have evolved. Many animals are coloured in a way so that they blend in with their environment, making it harder for their predators or prey to see them. This is why whales and dolphins are often grey to help them blend in with the water. This is a Risso's dolphin that started off grey but has developed white scars on its skin. Dolphins and whales can also be brown, black, white, and even pink, like the pink Amazon River dolphin. Let's have a look at some clever coloration that whales and dolphins have adapted to help them trick their prey. Firstly, countershading. Many marine animals have a form of coloration that we call countershading. This is where an animal is a dark colour on top of its body and a paler light colour underneath. For example, this striped dolphin here is dark grey on top and its belly is light grey. This means that when a dolphin or a whale is chasing its prey, such as a big school of fish, when it approaches them from below, it's harder for the fish to see them, again, as their dark backs blend in with the dark colour of the deep water underneath them. But when the dolphin approaches the fish from above them, it's harder for the fish to see its light belly against the light of the sky. So being dark on top and light underneath helps you to be camouflaged in the big open ocean. The same works for the dolphin if it is avoiding predators like orcas, as it is harder for the orcas to see them when they have countershading. Fin whales have a clever form of coloration, where one side of their lower jaw is white and the other side is grey. They use this in the same way as countershading, by using the white side of their mouths to catch fish from above, or the left grey side if they're catching the fish from underneath. Minke whales also use colour to confuse prey. They have white bands around their pectoral fins that they use when hunting. As they swim towards a school of fish, they spread out their pectoral fins. The white bands confuse the fish into thinking that there are two predators, so the fish ball together in the middle of the two white patches to avoid them. But what the fish don't realise is that they are doing this right in front of the minke whale's dark coloured mouth. So the minke whale simply opens its mouth and gets a big gulp of fish. Being made up of big blocks of colour and having different stripes and patterns can also make it hard for fish or predators to work out how many dolphins there are, as these colours break up the overall shape of the dolphin, again making it hard for them to be seen. These dolphins are called Commerson's dolphins. Patterns on whales and dolphins can also tell us about the health of the animal and can help individuals to recognise each other. The size of an animal is also an adaptation, as growing to a big size can help an animal to survive. Whales grow to huge sizes, and they are not only the largest animals on the planet, but some of the largest animals to have ever existed on the planet, and for them, being big has lots of advantages. The blue whale is the biggest animal in the world. The longest one ever recorded was 33 metres long. That's about the same length as not one, not two, but 3 double-decker buses. So why is being big a good adaptation for whales to have? Well, the bigger you are, the less likely you are to be eaten by predators. The blue whale only has one natural predator, and that's the killer whale. The bigger you are, the more food you can eat at once, and the more energy you can store. This means that whales can have a big gulp of food that will last them a very long time, meaning they can spend days and days travelling on their migration without having to eat. Also, the bigger you are, the less likely you are to lose heat. Animals lose heat from the body surfaces that are in contact with the surrounding water. Reducing this contact reduces heat loss. So increasing the surface of their skin increases heat loss. So for example, a big animal like an elephant has a big body compared to the amount of skin it has on the outside of its body, so it's able to store and keep more heat in its body than if it was smaller. A small animal like a mouse has a much harder job of keeping heat in its body because it has a high surface to volume ratio. Whales have a very low surface to volume ratio, meaning they have a big body mass, which means they have lots of weight inside their bodies, but not very much skin touching the water compared to how big their body is, which means they're very good at storing heat. So the bigger you are, the better you are at staying warm. It wasn't until around 3 million years ago that whales started to grow and evolve to be as big as they are today. The Pachycetus, the ancestor of the cetaceans that we learnt about in Lesson 1, was only around 2 meters long. Whales have been able to grow so big because in water you can float and are not pulled down by gravity like on land. An animal the size of a blue whale wouldn't be able to survive on land because gravity would make it so heavy that it wouldn't be able to move. But in the sea, animals can grow enormous and still be able to float and swim around. As we know, whales and dolphins are air-breathing mammals, so when they are underwater, they are holding their breath. Whales and dolphins can hold their breath for a lot longer than humans can, and some can dive to very deep depths. This Cuvier's beaked whale is the deepest diving of all the whales, and it can dive to 2,995 meters deep to catch its prey like squid. It is also the record holder for holding its breath longer than any mammal, and it has been recorded holding its breath for 2 hours and 49 minutes. If we humans tried to dive to over 2,000 meters, then that pressure and weight from all the water above us would be too great, and we simply wouldn't be able to survive. It would crush us. And we certainly wouldn't be able to hold our breath for that long. So how do the Cuvier's beaked whales manage? Well, they have some amazing adaptations to help them. The Cuvier's beaked whale has compressible lungs, which means its lungs can collapse and fold down under the water pressure, and that stops them popping under that large amount of pressure. They also have a foldable rib cage made from cartilage, which means that that can compress too under the pressure, and it makes them a lot more bendy and flexible than we are. They also have special chemicals in their bodies, which means that they can store lots of oxygen in their blood cells and in their muscles, rather than in their lungs. They can then slowly use this oxygen store throughout their deep dive. They have a high blood-to-body volume ratio, which means that they have a lot more blood than us, and they're able to store a lot more oxygen in it than we are. They're also able to shut off the blood supply to non-essential organs and extremities, meaning they can focus their blood supply around areas and organs that are really important to keep protected when they're diving. They can lower their heart rate as well to just a few beats per minute, and this helps them to save energy and oxygen when they're diving. Rather than swimming and pushing themselves down to those great depths using their flukes, instead they glide and sink down to the bottom. This saves them a lot of energy and a lot of oxygen. Before they go on their deep dive, they exhale about 90% of the air that's in their lungs, which enables them to compress their lungs. This also helps them to control their buoyancy, meaning that they're less likely to float, meaning it's easier for them to glide and sink down to the bottom. Their streamlined body shapes also help them to be a lot more flexible and withstand that pressure. And finally, they have little grooves for their flippers to go inside, called flipper pockets, and this also helps them to be a lot more streamlined and cope with that deep water pressure. Finally, let's look at the adaptations that whales and dolphins have to help them eat. As we learned in the first lesson, there are two types of cetaceans: baleen cetaceans and toothed cetaceans. The baleen cetaceans have baleen plates inside their mouths to help them filter out food from the seawater like a sieve. Most of the baleen whales have an adaptation called rorqual pleats, which are muscles in their throats that can expand and help the whale take huge gulps of food. Using their rorqual pleats, blue whales can scoop up around 100 bathtubs worth of seawater in 10 seconds. The toothed cetaceans have a different adaptation for feeding, which we also looked at in the first lesson, and that's echolocation. This is where they produce a clicking sound inside their heads using their phonic lips. This clicking sound is then made louder and pushed out by an organ in their head called a melon. The sound then hits its prey and echoes back towards the toothed whale or dolphin, and from that sound that bounces back to them, they can tell how big their prey is, how fast it's moving, and what direction it's moving in, meaning they can hunt in darkness and murky waters, or even look for food that's buried and hiding in the sand on the seabed. Here is the lovely image of the 90 species of cetacean known to exist in the world today. As you can see, there are lots of different species that have evolved to live in different habitats and have developed many adaptations to help them survive, making them a very interesting and varied group of animals. Let's recap what we have learned in this lesson. We know that whales and dolphins have lots of adaptations to help them survive in their marine environments, such as dorsal fins, pectoral fins, blowholes, their size and shape, their tail flukes, their colour, their blubber, their diving and hunting techniques. Thank you very much for watching this second Whale Education Month lesson. We now have some adaptation-themed activities for you to take part in.